This week I'll show you how to do some post-production to get maximum punch from your pictures.
Adorama TV presents Exploring Photography with Mark Wallace, where you will learn innovative techniques on shooting a wide range of photography. Here's your host, Mark Wallace.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography. I'm Mark Wallace and I'm joined by Carissa, and we are going to be talking today about some specifics concerning exposure, specifically black and white levels. Now I've got this right here. This is a color checker grayscale, and I've used this before in other videos, and some people have been asking me why I use it. Because when you set your correct exposure, sort of the theory goes that your middle gray will be set correctly, but then also your blacks and whites will be set correctly, right? Well, not really. And the reason for that is black is not always black and white is not always white. You have different variations of that. And we're going to concentrate on black today. And to do that, what I've done is I've set up this sort of crazy setup. We have a black background and it's glossy, so some of it's going to be lighter and darker. Carissa's got very dark hair. It's sort of black. And we have a black shirt and we have very dark jeans. We're going to shoot a portrait. Then we're going to go into Lightroom and I'm going to show you how black and white and all the different variations in between can be defined by you according to your taste. And it's something that you should be doing on all of your portraits. To start with though, what we're going to do is we're going to take a picture of this grayscale color checker, and I'll show you how even though you have a correct exposure, the black and white levels don't always fall into place. And then we'll go forward and do some more stuff with some creative developing of this portrait in Lightroom. So let's get started by taking a picture of you holding this. Okay, well I have two of the images we just shot in Lightroom 5, and we are really going to be moving along at a really fast clip so I can get everything into this video. Now, one of the things that I'm going to assume that you understand is how to use a histogram. If you don't, make sure you zip over to the Adorama Learning Center and read up on histograms, and we've also got some videos that I've created about using a histogram and how it works. So check that out if this is new to you. Well, the first thing we need to do, I'm going to go to the Develop module in Lightroom 5 here. We need to fix our color temperature. As you can see, this is a little bit off, so I'm going to go to my middle gray here, click that, and you can see now things line up as they should. Number one thing that I'm noticing here is the middle gray should be right in the middle of our histogram. It's not. It's shifted a little bit. So I'm going to shift my exposure up by about 1/3 of a stop so our middle gray is more closely aligned to the center. But take a look at a few things that we now see. Number one, this spike right here, this is the spike that represents these blacks. Well, notice it's not all the way to the blacks. It's well within about 1/3 stop from absolute black. And our whites, that spike is about 2/3, 1/3 stop in from absolute white. So we have middle gray, but we don't have absolute black, and we don't have absolute white. And so we have to have a way of increasing our contrast to get these a little bit darker and these a little bit brighter. But we want to do that in an intelligent way, because take a look at some of these things. If I use my color picker here, at the very bottom, it gives me, on my little target, it gives me a percentage of the mix between red, green, and blue. And notice that that's about 34%. So for anything that's gray or black, you can just sort of assume that's about a 49, 50% gray. This is a 13% black. It's not 0. So we have some detail here. This black over here, still black, it's 30%. Carissa's shirt is at 1%. This over here is at 16%. Her hair is at 4% over here. That's at 16%. So we have all different levels of black in these dark areas, and that's why up here on the histogram we have this big, broad area of different levels of black, because that's what we have, different levels of black. So what we want to do is we don't want to just change the exposure, change the contrast to sort of stretch these out. We want to intelligently control these different levels of black. So that's what we're going to do right now in our Develop module. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to zip back here, and we have these two images. We have the one that I just showed you. We're really going to be working with this image here because this image is more representative of what you would actually be working with. And notice it's got all kinds of issues. The shirt blends into the background. We have no detail in where her pants are. Her hair has no image detail either. And so we need to work on that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the adjustments we made with our target here, with our calibration target, and I'm going to apply those. So I've selected first this one and then our second image, and I'm going to sync the settings. So I'm going to sync the white balance, and I'm also going to sync my exposure as well. So I'll just click basic tone because it's got all of that stuff there. So I'm going to hit synchronize, and now all these settings have been applied to this new image, and we can start working with that. So I'm going to hit D, get back into the develop module, and now we have this image that we can start working with. And one of the things that's really important to note is that when you're working with an image, at the very bottom on the right, this camera calibration is very important. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So we have this profile. This is the Adobe standard profile that Lightroom uses by default. And I can't go into a lot of detail on what that is, except to say that it affects everything in your exposure colors and contrast and all kinds of things. And notice that I have all kinds of different profiles here that I can choose from, and these match the profiles that are in the camera that I use, the Nikon D3S. And so we can also create custom profiles using an X-Rite color checker passport, and maybe we'll do that in the future. So what I'm going to do is, let me just show you how these shadows change when I go to camera vivid. Notice that these areas change here. If I go to camera portrait, everything changes radically. Now we can see a lot more in those shadow areas. I'm going to choose camera neutral, and that gives me the most detail in those shadows. And notice now that I can start to see the shirt, the details in the shirt. We can start to see separation between the background. We can start to see pants. We can see different areas in Carissa's hair. It's a huge change from camera neutral to Adobe standard. So just adjusting that one thing opens up a world of information. So make sure you do that first, and you can do that to taste. I'm going to use camera neutral because it just sort of comes in and gives me a neutral starting point. Now, once I've done that, what I can do is I can start working with things. I'm going to take my exposure back down just a hair. That way, the reason I'm doing that is because by opening that up, it gave me some of the details that I didn't see in the first photo. So I'm going to just take that down to just about 0.15, so half of a third of a stop above where we started, because it turns out we were pretty much close to where we needed to be. Well, the second thing I want to do is I want to start working with these shadows. I want to start opening those shadows up. So on the shadow slider here, I'm going to start pulling those up, and I'm going to keep going until I start seeing detail. And notice that now I'm really starting to see detail in these areas here that used to be really, really dark. And so I'm not just taking the contrast and pulling that up. I'm actually working with just a specific part of the darks, and those are the shadows. So I'm actually expanding this area of the histogram, which really works terrific. Now, I don't want to lose all of the definition of my blacks, so I'm going to take my blacks actually down. How do I know how far down to go? Well, I can hit this little triangle here to say, tell me when I'm going too far. So that tells me how far is too far. And then I'm just going to take this down to about there. And I'm just doing this to taste because I want a really good definition of this black background here. I really want to see that. I'm going to shut this off again by hitting this little triangle. Now we're starting to get close. Well, one of the things I really love to do is I love to use the clarity slider because it's sort of like a sharpening and a contrast slider all in one. And so for this image, I'm going to take that slider, I'm going to move it up, and we're going to start seeing things happen. Look at that. All of a sudden, bam, details are starting to jump off the page. We're starting to see all kinds of detail here. We can start to see that there's actually junk on the background on this where we shot that we didn't even see before. And this is really starting to become clarified. But when we do that, we're going to start to see differences in the skin tone and things like that. Well, I want a little bit more color here, so I'm going to take my vibrance up by about 9. Remember, that's not taking all of my colors up, just the ones that are under saturated, and taking those up just a bit. And I'm going to take the overall saturation down just a little bit. So I'm just taking some of the colors that needed a boost up, and then I'm taking all colors down just a hair. And I'm doing that to taste, and it really works. One of the things I'm seeing, though, in Carissa's arms, these orange arms are a little starting to bug me. So what I'm going to do here is now I can go and play with each color specifically. So I'm going to take the saturation of the orange down. So I'll take that down around there and see how that's fixing her arms. If I take that up, take it down, see that really changes her skin tone. So I'm going to correct a little bit of the mistakes that I made by applying that clarity. So now we've sort of made this a desaturated look. And notice we have all kinds of details that we didn't have before. Well, the other thing we can look at is sharpening. I'm just going to leave that to the default because it looks good. I don't want to over sharpen anything. And then just to give us a little bit of punch, I'm going to actually add a vignette to make that stand out. So I'll just do that really quickly. And so what I'll do is I'm going to take this down to 60-ish. That seems about right. And then I will take that midpoint and I'll take that. It looks pretty good about like that. I think what I need to do though is I need to take this roundness and we'll take that and make it a little bit less round than it was before. So I'm just doing this to taste. So it's just give me a little border, and then I'll increase the feather just a hair, just so we have a little bit more pleasing look, and that works pretty good. So take a look. Here is the before and after shot. I'm going to do this by hitting Y. Notice we had no detail here. Here we have lots of detail, and it really works well. So that's my method for going in and taking a photo that's just blocked up and has no details to something that has a lot of details. Now there's some other things I would want to do to this image. I'd want to throw it in Photoshop. I want to fix up some of the skin tones and blemishes, and I'd also want to heal some of this stuff in the back. So there are all kinds of things that need to happen after this, but we're out of time for this video. But really quickly, you can see that you can go from bland to bam in a really, really short amount of time if you just know how to use your shadows, exposure, and then saturation in your fine controls in Lightroom 4 and Lightroom 5. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single episode. And if there are things that we talked about in today's episode that you just don't understand, well, there's good news for you. You can zip over to the Adorama Learning Center where there are tons, hundreds in fact, of tutorials and videos that will teach you about all kinds of things that have to do with photography, so don't miss out. Thanks so much for joining me, Carissa. It's been great to see you this week, and we'll see you again next time. This week, I'll show you how to adjust your black levels in Lightroom for maximum punch in your photos. Photos?
Want to get the most out of your Adorama photography equipment? Visit our Learning Center where you can read popular articles, how-to tips, buying guides, and product reviews.